Today's daf is Lamed Bet in Yoma, and we're going to start 3 lines from the top on Lamed Bet Amud Aleph. Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Now, what the Torah is going to, or what the Talmud is going to do here, what the Gemara is going to do, is point out that we have somewhat of a discrepancy in the way that between the way that the Torah describes Avodat Yom Kippurim and the way that it was actually done. Okay, so Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, this is the end of the 3rd line on Daf Lamed Bet. Uva Aharon el Ohel Moed. It says that Aharon would go into Ohel Moed. The rest of the pasuk is Upashat et Bigdei Abad Dasher Lavash Bevo Ohel HaKodesh V'Hinicham Sham, that he would take off the linen garments that he wore when he came into the Kodesh HaKodeshim and leave them there. That's the rest of the pasuk. Okay, now that appears at a point in the pasuk at a point in the text that it doesn't really belong. If you look at Rashi on the side, he says, Uva Aharon el Ohel Moed, Ne'emar Achar Shegamar Haktara, Umatan Damim Par V'Sa'ir. That it says this after it talks about the burning of the Ketoret, meaning Lifnai V'Lifnim, the burning in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and also the sprinkling of the blood of the Par and Sa'ir, that we know he goes in Achat, Achat V'Achat, Achat V'Shtayim, Achat V'Shalosh, etc. All of that, that's what it's talking about, the Matan Damim, the application of the blood of the Par V'Sa'ir. And then it says that Aharon is going to go into the Ohel Moed and take off the clothing. Okay, now what is that referring to? So, Lama Uba, why is he coming back into Ohel Moed? It just says that he went back into Ohel Moed to take off the clothes. You don't do. Why would he do that? He goes back into the Kodesh in order to take off the clothes? That's an odd place to take off the clothes. Okay, that he goes back in, as we read also in the Seder Avodah of Yom Kippur that we read in the Musaf, that he goes back into the Kodesh HaKodeshim in order to retrieve the kaf and the machta, in order to retrieve the keli that he put the ketoret in, and also the machta, the pan that he had the coals, because he would go in with the coals and he would put the ketoret onto the coals inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim. That was the hardest avodah that they had to do in the Beit HaMikdash. So it was very complicated. The coordination that he had to have was not easy. Okay.
From
the Torah, from Acharemot, yeah.
Why does it say Tanur Rabbanan?
Because it's discussing the pasuk.
Okay, I see. So
the rabbis taught first they quoted the pasuk and then they explained it.
I see.
Right, so the rabbis taught about this pasuk the following: that what does it mean he came into Ohel Moed and he took off his clothes? It means that he went into Ohel Moed and he had to go do something in there again. What was the thing that he had to do in there? He had to retrieve the kaf and machta, the kelim that he used for the ketoret. That's what Rashi says on the side. Shehiniach ben abadim, that he left there, right? Shekol parasha. It should say Shekola parasha kula nemra leseder chutz mi pasuk zeh. Everything in the parasha is in order except for this pasuk. Okay, because this is not actually the point at which he went to retrieve the kaf and machta. This was not the point. Now, because right after it says v'yatza v'asa et olato v'yat olata'am v'chiper bado v'ad beto. That's the rest of the pasuk, if I remember correctly, right? So that is the. So if we take a look, so if you look at Shkola Parasha, look at the side where Rashi speaks. So Ne'emru HaMikra'ot al Seder Avodot, that the psukim describe the order of the service on Hamitchalfot. Okay, Kesidran b'parasha kach seder avodatam. That according to how they appear in Parashat Acharemot, this is the order in which they are performed in actuality in the Beit HaMikdash, chutz mimikra zeh, except for the shekatav otzat kafu machta im avodot penimiyot. That when does the Torah mention that Aharon went back in to retrieve the kaf and machta? And that's where it says that he went into Ohel Moed and he takes off the clothes again. What is that referring to? That's referring to the retrieval of the kaf and machta. And it says that right after it describes the application of the blood of the Par and Sa'ir inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim and inside the Kodesh. Okay? But actually that's not when it happened. Because actually after he applied the blood of the Par V'Sa'ir and the in the Kodesh and in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, after he did that, what did he do? He went and he did the other avodot that didn't require the white garments, that were done with the golden garments, the avodot chutz, the ones that were outside. Okay, so as he says, V'lo ifsik avodat elo ve'ela am benatayim. And it doesn't mention in the Torah that was actually after going into the Kodesh HaKodeshim and applying the blood of the bull and the sa'ir. Right? The sa'ir l'Hashem, the goat that is dedicated to Hashem, and the par. So these two things, after he applied the blood, he went out and did olato ve'olat ta'am. He did the burnt offering of his own and of the people. And that was in Bigdei Zahav. That was in the golden garments because it was outside. And then he went back, he changed back into the white garments and went and got the kafan machta outside of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. That's how it should be written. That's why it says, Vayalo lichtov batchila v'yata. I'm reading Rashi. It should have first said v'yata v'asat olato, that he went out and did the olav, v'achar kach u'ba'aron lahotzi kafan machta. And then it should have said that he came in and retrieved the kafan machta, v'achar kach u'pashat et Bigdei abad v'inicham sham. And then it should have said that he left the white garments and he's changed back into his regular garments. Because what actually happened was that he went into the Kodesh HaKodeshim. What actually happened was that in the morning he put on the Bigdei Zahav. He put on the golden garments in order to do the avodah. And then he switched to the white garments in order to do the avodah inside. And then he switched back into the golden garments to do his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people that was all outside the Kodesh. So that's why it was in the golden garments. And then he switched back into the white garments again in order to go retrieve the Ketoret implements that he left inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim. And then he switched back into the golden garments to complete the regular avodah of Ben HaArbaim, of the afternoon. Okay? So that's what really happened. But in the Torah, what is it written? Right after he goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim and he applies the blood of the Parvus Sa'ir, it says that he changed out of the white garments. Okay, and then he was done with them. But that's not correct. He didn't go in and retrieve the kafan machta right after applying the blood of the offerings and then leave the white garments. That's not true. He first went out and did more avodah in the golden garments, then switched back into the white garments and went back in, and then switched into the golden garments again. Okay, so if you read the Torah literally, what does it sound like? There were only three different outfits. Golden garments in the morning, white garments for the avodot pinim, for the ones that are inside, that he completed totally. Then he left those, went back into the golden garments and finished the regular avodah in the golden garments. Okay?
The Gemara is saying,
but the Masoret, the tradition is that there was another change in between.
But who says that? No, the Gemara, like the Gemara comes after the Rabbanan, right? So how do
we're reading a Braita. We're reading a Braita. So this is from the rabbis of the Mishnah.
Braita to the Mishnah then.
No, the Mishnah. The Mishnah and the Braitot. The rabbinic tradition is that there were 5 switches, right? Because there are 5 tevilot.
Right.
Okay, so what this Braita is pointing out is that if you read the Torah literally in its order, then you don't have 5.
So they're comparing the text
to the tradition, to the oral tradition of how it was actually done.
And that's where they see the discrepancy.
That's the discrepancy.
Not an observation from somebody else.
No.
They're just
it's reading the Torah, and they have a tradition. They said if you read the Torah, it sounds like golden garments, white garments, done with the white garments, golden garments again.
Right. Okay.
But in the reality, it was golden, white, golden, white, golden.
Right.
Okay, that was how it really was done. That's the problem. So my ta'ama. Okay, what's the reason why you're saying that this is out of order? That because we have a tradition that there were 5 times that the Kohen went to the mikveh, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and 10 times that he washed his hands and feet. And if we follow the literal reading of the Torah, you don't need 10 kiddushim of yadayim v'raglayim. You don't need 5 tevilot. You only need 3 tevilot. 1 in the morning when he puts on the garments. 1 when he switches from gold to white. 1 when he switches from white to gold. That's it. You don't have 5. But according to the tradition, there are 10. Tani, we learned in a Braita. Rabbi Yehuda says, where do we have a source for the fact that there are 5 tevilot and 10 times that the Kohen Gadol washes his hands and feet on Yom Kippur? Talmud Lomar, because the Torah says, Uva Aharon el Oel Moed, Ufashat et Bigdei Abad. Because it says that Aharon went into Oel Moed and he took off the linen garments, Virahat Bisaro b'mayim b'makom kadosh, Vilavash et Bigadav. And then it says that he washed his body in a holy place, and he put on his normal bigdei kehuna, v'yatza v'asat olato v'yat olatam. Right, that's what it says. So in other words, it tells you that when he took off the white garments and switched back into the golden garments, that he had to do tevilah. So, which shows you that anybody who switches from one avodah to another has to do tevilah. Meaning, what he means from one avodah to another is that there's 2 categories. There's avodat penim and avodat chutz. Avodat chutz means the things that are completely done outside. Avodat penim is anything that's going to end, that's connected to the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Okay? So anything that's not connected to the Kodesh HaKodeshim is called avodat chutz. Anything that's connected to the Kodesh HaKodeshim is called avodat penim. So he says, from the fact that it says when he took off the white garments, he has to go to the mikveh and then go back into his regular big day kehuna, the 8 garments, the fancy ones that we read about, that he has to do that before he finishes the avodah. So you see from there that anytime you switch, you have to do tevilah. And implied in that, as we're going to see, is also kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. Amar Rabbi says, minayin lachamesh tevilot v'asra kiddushin shetovel kohen gadol u'mekedesh bo bayom. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi offers a different derivation for this. Shene'emar ketonet bad kodesh yilbash, because it says that a white tunic of linen he should wear, u'michnasei bad yual bisaro, and there should be pants of linen on his body, uvavnet bad yachgor, and he should wear a white belt, and he should wear a headdress, the turban that was also made of linen. Big de kodeshem. These are big de kodesh. And he should wash his flesh in water, meaning he should go to the mikveh and put them on. What do you see from here? Because it says that the implication is anytime you're going to put on big de kodesh, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, we can learn it from the pasuk Virachatz. Well, the pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda brought us before is that it says Upashatet bigdei habad virachatz b'saro b'mayim. Okay, so that was the way that Rabbi Yehuda learned it, and according to Rabbi, we learned it from the beginning of Parashat Acharei Mot when it says that he should wash all of his flesh and then put on the bigdei habad. Okay, so either way, they're learning it out that every time you switch clothing, you need a tevilah, and implied with the tevilah is also kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, as we're going to see, but they learned it out from different pesukim, as we're going to see this become significant in a moment. Now, okay, that was Rabbi's interpretation. Omer big de kodeshem, and it says big de kodeshem. Right in the pasuk, big de kodeshem v'rachatz b'mayim, which means what? Hukshu kol habegadim kulan zeh lazeh. That shows you that all bigadim are equal, because it says big de kodeshem v'rachatz b'mayim et kol b'sarol v'sham, which means what's the reason why you have to go to the mikveh before you put them on? Because big de kodeshem. Well, that means anytime you're putting on big de kodesh, whether it be big de zahav, the fancy clothing of the kohen gadol, or big de habad, the white clothing of the kohen gadol, you need to go to the mikveh. That's what Rabbi says. Right. Well, right, but they're just showing you the derivation. So Rabbi Yehuda learns it from the pasuk where it describes the Kohen Gadol taking off the white garments and putting back on the golden garments. Okay, Rabbi is learning it from the case where you take off the golden garments to put on the white garments. Okay, but they're basically saying the same idea. V'chamesh avodoten. Here are the 5 avodot that necessitate the 5 tevilot. What are they? Tamid shel shachar b'vigdei zahav. First, you have the tamid of the morning in the bigdei zahav. Now, when you read you see after you learn this masechet, you're going to go back this Yom Kippur Be'ezrat Hashem coming up of 57. What are we in now? 74. So 57, 75. Right? Yeah. So when we get to the next Yom Kippur, we're all going to read the avodah with new eyes, because you're going to understand all of these things. What is it? What is this? So now we're going to see. To dry. Yeah. So here are the 5 avodot, the reason why he has to change clothing 5 times. Because Tamid Shel Shachar B'Vigdei Zahav, he does the daily morning service first in Bigdei Zahav, golden clothing. In other words, that's slaughtering, receiving the blood, applying the blood of the Korban Tamid, going in and doing the Neirot, everything that he normally does on a regular day as part of the Shacharit service, the Korban Shel Shachar. Avodat Hayom B'Vigdei Lavan. Then he switches into the white garments because he has to do Avodat Hayom, which includes designating the Sa'ir LaAzazel and the Sa'ir LaShem, going in and bringing the Sa'ir and the Par and slaughtering them, applying the blood inside, applying the blood on the Mizbeach HaZahav and the Kodesh. So he goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim with the Ketoret, and then he applies the blood in there, and then he applies the blood outside. So all of these things that he has to do are done in the big day Lavan. Then Then he has to switch back into the golden clothing in order to do his ram and the ram of the people, which is a reference, as we learned, according to the halacha, according to the way the Rambam gives is posek in the end. The El Ha'am is just part of the Musaf. It's not. It's the part of the musaf and his personal ayil that he has to offer. This is done in Bigdei Zahav. Why? Because it's avodat chutz. It's done on the outer altar. It doesn't go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim at all. Kafu machta b'Bigdei Lavan, but then he has to switch back into the white garments because he forgot. He didn't forget. He left the ketoret stuff. Right, the pan and the container of the ketoret inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim to fill it with smoke. He has to go back in and get it now. And then Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim b'Bigdei Zahav, and then he has to switch back one last time into the golden garments to complete the day's avodah with the Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, the afternoon korban. So this is the 5 switches according to everyone. That's the 5 avodot that he has to do and the 5 changes that he has to make.
And the first one is his own,
from his street clothes into Bigdei Zahav.
But the first offering is his own?
No, Korban Tamid Shel Shachar.
Oh, Korban Shel, okay.
Yeah, Korban Shel Shachar. Right, so Ominayin Shekol Tevilah Tevilah Tzricha Shnei Kiddushin. And how do we know that every time he goes into the mikveh he also has to do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim? Remember, he has to wash his hands and feet before he takes off the previous clothing, and then after he puts on the new clothing, right? Except for the first one, because when he takes it off, it's street clothes, right? That was the machloket that we had.
Between the 2 clothes, the Lavan and the gold and the Lavan, shte tevilah?
No, 1 tevilah, 2 kiddushim, washing hands and feet. Right? So when he's going to take off the gold, let's say switching from gold to white, so he washes his hands and his feet, takes off this is the way the Chachamim say, takes off the golden clothing, goes to the mikveh, puts on the white clothing, washes his hands and feet again. That's the way that it goes according to the Chachamim. Talmud Amar. So how do we know that every time he switches clothing, he needs not only tevilah, but he also needs to wash his hands and his feet once before and once after? How do we know that? Because it says, Talmud Amar, upashat v'rachatz v'lavash. Because it says, upashat v'rachatz, he should take off, and he should take off the clothes and then wash his hand, and then virachatz, which sounds like it means he has to go into the mikveh. Then it says virachatz v'lavash, that he has to wash and then he puts on the clothes. So these virachatz v'lavash or upashat virachatz are superfluous because we already know that he has to go to the mikveh in order to change clothes each time. We already know that. So why does it mention again that he takes off the clothes and washes, and that he washes and then puts on the clothes? To tell you an additional type of washing that he has to do, the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. So now we say Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says Kal V'Chomer. It's actually a Kal V'Chomer. We don't need these extra Pesukim to teach us that the Kohen Gadol has to do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim each time. Why not? Because Uma b'makom she'en ta'un tevilah ta'un kiddush, makom she'ta'un tevilah eno din she'ta'un kiddush. Because even in a place where he doesn't require any tevilah, in a situation where he doesn't require any kind of immersion, he still requires Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. As we learned earlier, that according to most of the Chachamim, when the Kohen comes in the morning to go to the mikveh before he goes in to do avodah, that's rabbinic, right? The real biblical requirement is that he just wash Yadayim V'Raglayim. That he always has to wash his hands and feet. Minakior. That's what it says. V'rachatzu Aharon uvanav mimenu et yedehem v'et raglehem. Right? Bevo'am el oel moed. That's what it says. So that's the main thing. So even when they don't require tevilah, they require kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. So here, where they require tevilah, isn't it obvious? So makom sheta'un tevilah eno din. Right? Isn't it logical? Sheta'on kiddush. Right? Isn't it obvious that they're going to have to wash their hands and feet? I mean, if when they don't need to do tevilah, they need to wash their hands and feet, that's the most important thing. We said if they don't wash their hands and feet in the morning, if they didn't do tevilah in the morning and they did the avodah, it's still kasher. But if they didn't wash their hands and feet in the morning, it's pasul. So it's even more important. So if in a place where they don't require tevilah, they require kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, certainly here where immersion is necessary in between the changing of clothes, they're going to need kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. Of course, the Baraita asks, maybe just like in the morning they only have to wash their hands and feet twice, maybe they should only have to wash their hands, once. Maybe so too here, they should only have to wash their hands once in between changing clothes. Why are you saying it's twice? Why not only once?
And what is the difference between Kiddush and Tevilah?
It's just hands and feet.
So Kiddush is...
It's just washing, like Netilat Yadayim and washing your feet.
And Tvila...
You're clothed.
Oh, and Tvila is immersion.
It's actually going in, yeah. So if in a case where you don't need Tevilah, you need Kiddush. In a case where you need Tevilah, certainly you need Kiddush. So then how do you know that you need 2 Kiddushim? How do you know it's not just 1? Like normally in the morning, how many does the Kohen do when he comes? 1. He puts on his big day kehunai, washes his hands and feet, that's it. So how do you know 2? Talmud Omar, because it says that Aaron will come in and he will take off the big day abad. He will take off the linen garments that he was wearing. Why does it have to mention asher lavash, that he put on? Kilum adam poshet elamash lavash. Obviously, does a person take off what he hasn't put on yet? So why does it have to mention he has to take off what he put on? Of course he has to take off what he put on. It's to teach you that taking off clothing is like putting on clothing. Just like it says that he has to do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim when he puts on the new begadim, so too does he have to do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim when he takes off the begadim. That is the way that the Braita understands it. Okay, and that's what Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says. So now we go back to Amar Rabbi Yehuda again. We're gonna back up to the to Rabbi Yehuda's din that he said before. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, because in other words we've been reading the Braita all this time. Now we have to analyze the Braita. This is a long Braita. It was like the whole page. Okay, now the Gemara is going to try to take a look at this Baraita more carefully. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, how do we know that the Kohen Gadol has to do 5 tevilot and 10 kiddushim of Yadayim v'Raglayim on the day of Yom Kippur? Because it says that he has to go into Oil Moed and he has to wash himself in Makom Kadosh and then put on the clothing, right? Then put on the big day zahav again. This shows you that anybody who changes from one clothing to another has to, or from one avodah to another avodah has to go to the mikveh. But wait a second. What is that talking about? It's talking about when you go from white to gold. Because remember, he learns it from the case where the Kohen Gadol is taking off the white garments to put on the gold. So the Gemara asks, Ashkechan mi big day lavan, the big day zahav, mi big day zahav, the big day lavan minayin. Very nice that you showed me a case where he switches from white garments to golden garments. But how do I know when he switches from golden garments to white garments that it should be the same? Turning to Lamed Bet Amud Bet, Tanat Devei Rabbi Yishmael, the Yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael taught, Kal v'chomer, it's a Kal v'chomer. Ma bigdei zahav she'en kohen nechnas ben lifnai v'lifnim ta'un tevilah. If to switch into the bigadim that are bigdei zahav, the golden garments, where a person does not go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, if those require tevilah, then obviously bigdei lavan shenechnas ben lifnai v'lifnim eno din sheta'un tevilah. Isn't it logical that if you're going to wash just to put on the bigdei zahav that are of a lesser stature, they're of a lesser kedusha, you can't go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim with them? If for that you need to do tevilah, certainly when you switch from golden garments into white garments, you need tevilah. Certainly. The Gemara says, no, ikal mifrach. We can dispose of this kal v'chomer. It's no good. Ma'ale bigdei zahav, sheken kaparatan merubah. That bigdei zahav have a greater kapara. In other words, what does that mean? It means that bigdei zahav are what you use all the time. In other words, bigdei lavan have a limited use. Rashi says, shemishamesh ben kol yemot hashana. It's all year round that he wears the bigdei zahav. He wears the golden garments, the Kohen Gadol. So maybe it's superior to switch into the bigdei zahav. You need tevilah. Maybe to switch into the bigdei lavan, they're only used once a year. There wouldn't be any tevilah for that. So therefore, how does he know that? Ela nafkale midi Rabbi. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda learns it from the pasuk of Rabbi. Because what was Rabbi's pasuk? Rabbi's pasuk was that it said, "V'rachatz b'mayim et kol bisaro ul vesham." Right? Bigdei kodeshem. It says that they are holy garments and you have to wash before you put them on, which is referring to putting on the bigdei lavan.
I mean, it's now assumed that bigdei zahav were of a higher standard.
That's what you would think.
Because intuitively, you
they seem fancier.
Right.
Yeah, they seem fancier. Yeah. So that's what, but that's exactly what the Gemara says. You can't learn from one to the other.
Right.
So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is going to have to take the pasuk of Rabbi also, where it says that he washes in order to put on the bigdei lavan. So you have for bigdei zahav, you have for bigdei lavan too. So Amar Rabbi said, "Minayin lachamesh tevilot v'asar kiddushin shtevel ben kohen u'mekadesh bo bayom." So how does Rabbi learn that you need 5 tevilot and 10 kiddushim? Talmud lomar ketonet bar kodesh ilbash, because it says that he's going to put on the white garments, and then it says big de kodesh hem v'rachatz b'mayim et kol b'sarol v'sham. Right? It says that they're holy garments, and he has to wash his whole body and put them on. So again, Rabbi learns it from this pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda learned it from the pasuk about going from white to golden. Okay? Rabbi learns it from when you go from gold to white. It says that you have to wash. And therefore you see that you have to wash whenever you change. So now the Gemara asks the same question on Rabbi. Wait a second. Ashkechan mi bigdei zahav le bigdei lavan. Very nice, Rabbi. You showed us that you have to wash when you go from bigdei zahav to bigdei lavan. But wait a second. What about the other way around? Bigdei lavan le bigdei zahav minayin. How do you know that going from white to golden is going to require tevilah? How do you know? So Tanad ve Rabbi Ishmael's yeshiva taught as follows: Kal v'chomer ma bigdei lavan she'en kaparatan merubat unin tevilah. If changing into the white garments, here's what Rabbi will tell you. If changing into the white garments, and white garments are of a lesser stature because they only have a functionality for one day. Okay? If that requires tevilah, then bigdei zahav shekaparatan merubat enodin she'unin tevilah, then certainly the bigdei zahav that are used every day, the gold garments are used every day for kapara. Kaparatan mirubah, they provide a lot of kapara. They should require tevilah, for sure. So what is the Gemara going to do? It's going to play both sides of the field. Wait a second. No, I'll say this. I'll say no. Maybe bigdei lavan are better. Why are white garments better? Because you're going to go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim wearing them. That's why they require tevilah. In other words, so before, when Rabbi Yehuda wanted to use the argument that bigdei lavan were superior, right? Because they are the ones that you go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim with, the Gemara said no. Maybe bigdei zahav are better because you use them more. So here, when Tanad ve Rabbi Ishmael says that no, maybe bigdei zahav are better, like you said before, bigdei zahav are a kaparatan merubah. No, maybe bigdei lavan are better because you go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim. In other words, both reasons are valid. So you can't use one as an absolute for a kal v'chomer. You have to have absolute for a kal v'chomer. If I can poke a hole in it, it's no good. So if I can poke a hole either way. So therefore, hainu de katane. This is exactly why Rabbi has to bring an additional pasuk. Bigdei kodeshem v'rachatet b'sor b'mayim u'levesham. That's why he has to bring the pasuk that emphasizes bigdei kodeshem. It's because they're bigdei kodesh. And right, exactly. In other words, if Rabbi had just used the example of switching into the white garments, you can't learn a general principle from that example, because I can tell you, no, that's only for white garments, not gold. But because it says bigdei kodeshem, why does he do tevilah? Because they're holy. That will apply to all of them then. Okay? So now chamesh, we said, v'chamesh avodot hen. What are the 5 avodot? Tamid shel shachar b'bigdei zahav. The regular daily morning service in the golden garments. Avodat hayom b'bigdei lavan. The special service of Yom Kippur that involves going into the Kodesh HaKodeshim. White garments. Elo ve'el ha'am b'bigdei zahav. His ram and the ram of the people. Golden garments. Kafu machta b'bigdei lavan. Retrieving the parts of the ketoret that were left inside. That's with bigdei lavan. Tamid shel ben arba'im b'bigdei zahav. And then the Tamid of the Ben Arba'im, the Tamid of the afternoon, is with bigdei zahav. Now notice, there's a lot of repetition because it keeps repeating the Braita. That's why I said this stuff is relatively easy, because it's just repeating the same thing, a lot of it. So now we're quoting the Braita again. How do you know that every tevilah requires 2 kiddushim? Because it says he should take off the garments and wash. He should wash and put on the garments. Hi betvilah ketiv. That's talking about tevilah. That's not talking about that's talking about how he has to go to the mikveh. It's not talking about kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. So why are you telling me that teaches you that I need 2 kiddushei yadayim v'raglayim every time? It says v'rachatz et bisaro b'mayim. That means his whole body. Okay, so the imeno inyan tevilah dinafkale mi bigdei kodeshem. Since Rabbi doesn't need that pasuk. Okay, he doesn't need that pasuk to teach you that you have to go to the mikveh in between putting on clothes. Why? Because you learned it from bigdei kodeshem. The pasuk says that anytime you put on bigdei kodesh, you have to do tevilah. So therefore, what are these extra pasukim that describe upashat v'rachatz v'lavash? What do you need them for? Teneu inyan lekiddush. So you can assume that they're referring to an even further type of washing. What's the even further type of washing? Hands and feet.
Wait, so the text does say Verachat et Besaro. It says Verachat et Besaro. It doesn't just say Verachat, right?
Right.
So and the
it says Besaro.
Is consistent to refer to Rachat
Besaro. Right. But since we already know the halakha, that you need tevilah in between Bigdei Kodesh, so it must be coming to tell you a further level of cleaning your body, which is Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. And since it says it after taking off clothes and before putting on clothes, after taking off clothes and...
So how is it further? In other words, Rachat et Besaro, so you do the tevilah, and then after you do tevilah, you do the...
You do it twice, the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. One you do before you take off clothes A. Then you go to the mikveh. Then when you come out, you put on clothing B, and then you do tevilah. And then you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim again.
I see.
Okay? So, at least that's the way that most of the Chachamim learn. V'lich tevei Rachmana b'lashon Kiddush. Why then doesn't the Torah write it in the Lashon of Kiddush? Why doesn't it say V'rachatz Yadav V'Raglav? Why does it say V'rachat et Bisaro? That sounds like tevilah. The answer is Hakamash Malan. The tevilah ki kiddush. It's to compare tevilah and kiddush. How so? Because ma kiddush makom kadosh, af tevilah b'makom kadosh. Just like we wash hands and feet in a holy place, so too are all the immersions of the Kohen Gadol in a holy place. Meaning they're on the precincts of the Beit HaMikdash. They're not outside the precincts of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, on the premises. But this is all according to Rabbi. This is not going to work according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why not? Rabbi Yehuda...
Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi.
No, Rabbi Yehuda is a different guy. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is somebody else. Rabbi Yehuda is different. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that always argues with Rabbi Meir. It's a different chachamim.
Same generation?
Not necessarily. I don't know if they overlap, but I don't think so.
Okay, so it's a different Rabbi Yehuda.
Different Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Kiddush Minale. So where is Rabbi Yehuda going to get Kiddush? What's the problem? Because Rabbi Yehuda used the pasuk of he used the pasuk that talked about going from the white clothing to the golden clothing already, right? Upashat v'rachatz. He used that as his main pasuk. He used that as the key pasuk, right? So he can't use that pasuk as the source for Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. He said that that's the source when it describes taking off the white garments and putting on the golden garments. That was the source for having to do tevilah. He used the pasuk of Bigdei Kodesh V'Rachatz B'Mayim when you're putting on the white garments as his key pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda uses the pasuk. So therefore, for Rabbi, the pasuk of taking off the clothing, taking off the white clothing and putting on the gold is superfluous for Rabbi. Because it says when it says upashat et bigadav v'rachatz, that's superfluous for Rabbi. But for Rabbi Yehuda, he's using that as his key pasuk. It's not superfluous for him. So where is he going to learn Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim from? Nafkalei mid Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. He will learn it from what Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Shimon says. Now what did Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon say? That was on the previous page. That Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon said that it's a kal v'chomer. Just like when you don't have tevilah, you need, if when you don't need tevilah, you need Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, certainly whenever you need tevilah, you need Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. And how do we know that it's twice? That's what they also said. They said, how do you know that it's twice? You know that it's twice because it says, Upashat et bigdei abad asher lavash, right? That it talks about taking off what he put on. Meaning, just like when you put it on, you need Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, so too when you're going to take it off, you need Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda will take the analysis of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Why does he have to do that? Because he also needs, in other words, everyone wants to get to the same place here. There's no machloket really. There's no machloket in the facts between Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda. There's no machloket. It's just a question of what's the derivation. So according to Rabbi that you learn the derivation from the putting on of the white garments, then he can use the description of taking off the white and putting on the gold to teach Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. But according to Rabbi Yehuda that says, no, I need one pasuk to teach me that going from white to gold, and that's the one that I'm going to use for that, to show that you need tevilah. And then I'm going to take the pasuk of Rabbi over there to teach you that also from gold to white requires tevilah. But now I have no pasuk to teach Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim anymore. Because the pasuk, I'm using both pasukim just to teach tevilah. Rabbi wasn't using my pasuk to teach tevilah, so he can say it's implying also Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Okay? But I used it already. You can't use it twice? Right. You can't, not in this case, definitely not. Okay, because the whole basis for Rabbi's derivation is that it's extra, so he doesn't need it. So that's why he can say it's talking about Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. So Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says, no, I'll learn Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim from what Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says. I don't need it. Right, it's how to learn it.
In the application of the law, it's just in the...
It seems like the machloket could be that that whether you need a pasuk, whether each one of these things, the transition from gold to white and white to gold, requires a separate pasuk. Is it a separate phenomenon that from white to gold you require a tevilah and from gold to white? Or is it one concept? If it's one concept, you only need one pasuk. If it's two concepts, you need two pasukim maybe.
But the action of the kohen is the same.
It's the same. Yeah. So that could be what the underlying theoretical machloket is, whether you need one pasuk for this or you need two because it's two different things. Right? So in either way, he's left with the problem. So he solved it because he took Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Amar Rav Chisda says, Had Rabbi mafka mid Rabbi Meir umafka mid Rabbanan. This teaching of Rabbi doesn't follow Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't follow Rabbi Meir, and doesn't follow the rabbis. So what does that mean? So we look at what Rashi says on the side. Mafka mid. So Rav Chisda says, Kasavar Rav Chisda. This is Rashi. Davka Amar Rabbi upashat v'rachatz v'lavash shnei kiddushin ben pshita levisha echad lefnei tevilah ve'echad la'achareya kodem levisha. So Rav Chisda is operating with the following premise, Rashi says, which is that when Rabbi said that I learned from upashat v'rachatz, right, v'rachatz v'lavash, it means that this is the order according to Rabbi. You take off the big day zahav, and then you do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim and tevilah. And then you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim again, and then you put on the clothes. Okay? In other words, that's the order that he's describing. In other words, they're in between Pshita and Levisha. In between. Okay? That's what he's saying. So, Mafkami de Rabbi Meir, look at what he says in Rashi. Mutzeti miklal dvarav shel Rabbi Meir. Those viraled ke Rabbi Meir. Okay? That he's not holding like Rabbi Meir. Okay, why? Even though it says in the Mishnah he takes off the clothes and he does kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, this virale kiddush lefnei tevilah achar pshitahu, that he's saying that you do this kiddush yadayim v'raglayim after taking off the clothes. Paligale mia b'kiddush sheni. Deka'amar achar levishahu kidekatani baraita de Rabbi Meir le'el lavash kiddush yadav raglav. So what is he saying? He's saying that he agrees with Rabbi Meir in one and he disagrees in one. Because Rabbi Meir had said that after he takes off the clothes, that's when he does kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. So that he's saying Rabbi agrees with. However, according to this, Rabbi says that you have to also do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim before putting on the clothes. So let's say you're going from gold to white. According to Rav Chisda, this is what Rabbi is suggesting. Take off the golden clothes, do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, go to the mikveh, come out, do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, and put on the white clothes. Rabbi Meir would say, he would agree with the first part, take off the golden clothes, do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, go to the mikveh. But then he would say, put on the clothes, and then do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. So they agree with one thing, and they disagree on one thing. And he says it's mutzet, it's also, mafka, midrabanan. Okay, and it's also outside of the Rabbanan or taken out of the Rabbanan. How so? Because we're going to see. So Rashi doesn't have to explain that.
So Rashi actually posits that there is still a machloket with the actual process.
There could be. Yeah, so let's see. So, okay. Midrabanan. Te'ilu Rabbanan ka'amri. It's because the rabbis say, Kishu lavush mikadesh. The rabbis say when he's dressed, he should do the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. But you amar kishu poshet mikadesh. Okay? Because the rabbis say that he should do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim when he's clothed. And according to Rabbi, it's after he takes off the clothes that he does Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Umafkami de Rabbi Meir dealer. And what's the difference with Rabbi Meir? Dealer Rabbi Meir amar hach Kiddush batra kishu lavush mikadesh. V'yu amar kishu poshet mikadesh. In other words, in both cases, there's that according to the way Rav Chisda is reading Rabbi, he agrees with Rabbi Meir on one, disagrees with him on one. He agrees with the Chachamim on one, and disagrees with them on one. How so? With Rabbi Meir, he agrees, when do you do the first Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim? After you took off the big day zahav. After you take off the golden clothes, you do the first Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Then you go to the mikveh, then you come out.
I thought they agreed on that.
That's what he's agreeing on with Rabbi Meir. That's what he's agreeing on. Okay? But that the Chachamim disagree with. So on the front, in other words, when he takes, according to the Chachamim, there's a machloka between the Chachamim and Rabbi Meir. Okay?
Right.
Which is, when do you do the first Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim? The first. Okay? When do you do the first? The Chachamim say it's while you're wearing the gold clothing, you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, then you take off the golden clothing. Go to the mikveh, put on the white clothing, wash your hands and feet again. In other words, according to the Chachamim, you're always clothed when you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. According to Rabbi Meir, you first take off Bigdei Zahav, then do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. Then you go to the mikveh, then you come out, put on Bigdei Habad, you put on the white clothing, and then you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim.
It's so hard.
It's not that hard. In other words, according to, so what the, look at this. In the beginning, the first washing of the hands.
Yeah.
Does it happen while I'm wearing clothes or when I'm not wearing clothes?
When you're...
That's a machloket.
That's a machloket, right.
Between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. One says while it's on, one says not.
Yeah.
So what Rav Chisda is saying, Rabbi agrees on this with Rabbi Meir. That it's after you take off the clothes that you do it. Now let's go to the other end. On the other end, when do you do the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim? Before you put on the white garments or after? Everyone agrees after. Both the Chachamim and Rabbi Meir agree after. And on that, Rabbi is saying no, before. He's saying no, before. So in other words, there would be three orders. Chachamim say, wash hands, take off golden clothing, go to mikveh, put on white clothing, wash hands again. Rabbi Meir says, take off golden clothing, wash hands, go to mikveh, put on white clothing, wash hands again. Rabbi would say, take off golden clothing, wash hands. That he's agreeing with Rabbi Meir. Right. Go to mikveh, come out. Here's where he disagrees with everybody. Wash hands, then put on white clothing.
Okay, this is from the text of the Gemara itself, or is
this Rashi saying? No, I'm telling you what it's saying. That's what it says. Okay. So in other words,
my logic, I prefer to take off the clothes, wash hands, and then the rachas.
Okay.
Why? Because if you wash hands before the clothes,
that's true.
And you ruin the golden thing.
Then you have to go argue with them. Then they said no. Okay, so because the Chachamim said no. Now, okay, so that's what the that's where the machloket is. So it says the Ilu Rabbi Meir Amar Hach Kiddush Batrak Shulavush Mekadesh. So whereas Rabbi Meir, you might think that Rabbi is agreeing with Rabbi Meir because look, he's saying that you have to take off the golden clothes and then wash your hands.
Right.
Okay? But no, he doesn't really agree with Rabbi Meir because when you put the clothes back on, when you put the white clothes back on, Rabbi Meir says you wash your hands after you put them on. Whereas we're interpreting Rabbi as saying that no, you wash your hands before you put on the white clothing, not after. Okay, so Rabbi doesn't fit with either view. He doesn't fit with the Chachamim on the first part. He fits only with Rabbi Meir. And on the second part, he doesn't fit with anybody. Because everybody except...
It's not completely clear that Rabbi actually posits.
That is true. That's what the Rav Chisda is assuming. Right. Rav Chisda is assuming that. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, no, you're wrong. This is what you're saying, right? Hakol modin. Everybody agrees with Kiddush Sheni Shelovesh V'achar Kach Mekadesh. Everybody agrees on the second one. That you first put on the clothes and then wash your hands. Everybody, that's not true that Rabbi says you wash your hands first. That's not true. Okay? And so therefore, my ta'ama, what's the reason? The Amar Kar, because the Pasuk says, O v'gishtam el ha-mizbeach. That when does it say that v'rachatzu Aharon v'nav v'menu edidem et rak lehem v'wam el ol moed, right? It says when they come into the Oel Moed l'sharet b'kodesh, O v'gishtam el ha-mizbeach, right? Or it says, O v'gishtam el ha-mizbeach. Right? When they come to the Mizbeach, that's when they have to wash their hands and feet. What does that mean? Mi she'eno mechusar ela gisha. When are you supposed to wash your hands and feet? Someone who's only missing gisha, meaning he's ready to go do the avodah. The only thing he's missing is washing his hands. However, this one, Yatsa zeh shemechusar levisha vegisha. We wouldn't tell a person to wash their hands and feet, he's missing levisha and gisha. Meaning to say, in other words, when do you wash your hands and feet? When you're ready to go do the avodah, you have the clothes on. The only thing you're missing is washing your hands and feet. That's the only thing standing in the way of going to do the avodah. But if you assume that Rabbi is saying you wash your hands and feet and then you put on the clothes, then he's not doing that. When he washed his hands and feet, he wasn't ready to do the avodah. He was naked still. Now he puts on the clothes and now he's going to go. It's the wrong order. The washing of hands and feet has to be right before the avodah, the gisha, as it says here. So therefore, we reject that interpretation of Rabbi, and it turns out that Rabbi could even be squared with the Chachamim. Or he could be squared with Rabbi Meir. It's not entirely clear.
I don't understand how Rabbi on his own posits something that the Chachamim already agreed upon.
What do you mean? What are you saying? Rabbi posits?
How can it be posited that it's different? That he says that is he saying no? That's how it is, or is he saying no? That's how the Chachamim?
Of course, he's assuming that they agreed with him. The previous Chachamim would have agreed with him. Okay. Of course, yeah. So the assumption always is that you're trying to get to what the original truth was.
Right.
So sure. So Amar le Rav Acha b'rei de Rava le Rav Ashi. Rav Acha, son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, Lo Rav Chisda itlei de Rav Acha, v'lo Rav Acha itlei de Rav Chisda. That Rav Acha can't agree with Rav Chisda and vice versa. Why? De imkein le Rabbi havu le chamesar kiddushin. Because if so, then for Rabbi would be 15 kiddushin. So let's see what this means. So let's take a look at Rashi. What does it mean that Rav Chisda doesn't agree with Rav Acha? Because Rav Chisda da amar milte de Rabbi davka ba'e shnei kiddushin ben pshita levisha. Because according to Rav Chisda, Rabbi requires the 2 kiddushei yadayim v'raglayim in between taking off the first clothing and putting on the second clothing, right? In between them. Because you take off the first, you're naked both times, right? You took off the first, you washed your hands and feet, went to the mikveh, washed your hands and feet, put on the second.
Well, but if you did it before, that would be called the in between as well. You would have washed in between, even if you did it.
No, meaning in between taking off the first and putting on the second.
In between and after the tefillah.
Right.
Because after the tefillah and before.
We're looking at taking off of clothes, putting on of clothes. So when does the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim happen according to Rav Chisda? In between them.
Possible step in between.
Well, before tefillah and after tefillah. Right? In other words, you could say it this way. You could say that in a way, the way that Rav Chisda is interpreting it is that kiddush yadayim v'raglayim is like part of tefillah. You wash your hands and feet, you go into the mikveh, you come out of the mikveh, you wash your hands and feet, and then you go put on the new clothes. It's almost like that.
It's a given that when you do that, you're when you do tefillah, you do.
That's how Rav Chisda seems to be interpreting it. So according to that, he can't hold like Rav Acha. Why not? Because Rav Acha is saying that kiddush yadayim v'raglayim always has to be done right before avodah when you're fully dressed. Now, if Rav Chisda agreed with that, that would mean he would require 3 kiddush yadayim v'raglayim every time, because he would have to do 2 in between pshita and levisha, 1 after you took off, let's say, the golden garments, then 1 before you put on the white garments, and then 1 after you put on the white garments. And he doesn't hold that.
Unless he holds that the rachatz yadayim v'raglayim is not necessarily right after the tefillah. When you're still naked.
Right.
Unless he holds that that's not required.
Unless, but he doesn't. I'm saying that's the whole point. So Rav Chisda can't agree with Rav Acha.
He says 3.
No, the other way around. They're saying he can't agree with Rav Acha because then he would have 3.
Okay.
Right, the other way, right? In other words, because he's already saying there's 2.
Okay.
So if he also agrees that after you put on clothing before you go do avodah, you have to wash hands and feet again, that would be 3. Then you'd have 15.
Right.
On Yom Kippur.
Right.
2 in between the clothing change, and 1 after, and that's not the case. So it's counterfactual, right? But they're proving it what reductio ad absurdum. In other words, if he agreed with Rav Acha, he would have to have 3, which is no good. Okay, other side, and Rav Acha, who requires kiddush yadayim v'raglayim before avodah, cannot agree with Rav Chisda. Why? As Rashi explains, the ba'ele Rabbi shenei kiddushin kishu arum. Because according to Rav Chisda, you need 2 kiddushay yadayim v'raglayim while you're naked. Okay? De'imken de'itlahu bahadadei havulei Rabbi gimel kiddushayin b'chol tevilah. So, like we already said, basically. In other words, this seems to be my big question on this piece of the Gemara is it's obvious. It's superfluous, right? Because you just did all the. No, not that. I was saying something else. In other words, this piece of Gemara is obvious because Rav Acha came along to dispute Rav Chisda. In other words, Rav Acha came and said, no, everybody agrees that Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, the last one, has to be after you put clothes on. So obviously he doesn't hold like Rav Chisda that you need to do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim twice in between taking off and putting on.
Right.
Obviously not, because he's coming to tell you, no, the second one has to be after you put on clothes. So why here does the Gemara have to say Rav Acha Berei de Rava has to say to Rav Ashi that obviously Rav Acha doesn't agree with Rav Chisda? Of course he doesn't. He came to disagree with it. Right? I mean, yes, he had to mention that Rav Chisda doesn't agree with Rav Acha that there's another washing of hands and feet that needs to be done after the clothes are put on. Right? That maybe needed to be said, but do you have to mention that Rav Acha doesn't agree with Rav Chisda? Of course he doesn't. He came to say that no, the second Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim has to be at the end.
Right.
After the Visha. So that's a question I would be left with, but for today, Baruch Adonai Le'olam Amen.